What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Preppers Live. I'm David Wilson, and we're back again with another Friday stream where we get together as a community and talk about whatever topic I came up with. Not exactly at the last minute this time. We'll talk about that. Thankfully, it wasn't at the last minute, but let me make sure that the chat widget is pulled up here because I didn't actually test it. Here we are. All right, so I am... Let me know if the microphone's peaking. I am super late scheduling the stream. Sorry about that. Got a little bit busy with some things today, so it only just got scheduled maybe 1 minute before the typical stream time, so probably some people have not seen it. That's okay, though, because we'll have fun anyway, even if some people aren't here today. Let me say hello to the folks who are here so far. We have Roberto over on the YouTube side. Roberto says, can't join today on the IRC side. Well, that's unfortunate. I understand, though, because I had IRC joining problems recently, too, so... We also have Glenn and Fade over on the IRC side. I imagine more people will probably start filtering in once they realize I am actually streaming today and not just joking around. There probably will be a fair amount of joking around, though, but we'll see. Okay. So let's see. Updates. So did I talk about this last week? Probably didn't talk about it last week because I didn't get a chance to try it yet. But this week I've been trying to buy a Framework 13. I just decided that I'm going to pull the trigger and buy a Framework 13 laptop to replace my trusty but disabled ThinkPad X1 Nano. You can go and look at the previous couple streams to hear more about that story. But the point being is I need a new kind of workhorse laptop, the one that I do all my writing on, all my coding projects on, etc. And I was sort of tossing between the idea of getting another ThinkPad, which is really a bad idea because I have not had such great luck with them over the last few years, or to try to get a Framework 13 because it really satisfies a lot of the criteria that I have for a laptop, in addition to having all the parts be replaceable, including the case, all the internal components. You can upgrade the motherboard, you can upgrade all the parts inside of it pretty easily. So I'm trying to order one of these, and for whatever reason, my bank in Greece decided that it did not actually want to let me purchase this computer on Framework's website. And it's funny because Framework is a German company, so they're in the EU. It's not like I'm, buying it from some shady website from an quote-unquote non-trusted country, which I don't really know what that would be. Oh, let me see if the stream is already dying. Okay, it's not. YouTube's just complaining. So basically, I've tried multiple times this week to order this laptop, because I think it's going to be a good choice. I think it will help me avoid the problems that I've been having recently, but my bank's not letting me. So that's sort of the current state of the world on my ongoing computer troubles. It's also why I haven't been as active on the IRC recently. I did get my GPG keys set back up on this machine now so that I can actually join my bouncer, which is great. But yeah, still not operating at full capacity because I don't have multiple machines that I can use and sort of balance things between all day long. So it's been a little bit of a trouble from that perspective, but it's okay. Like, I'll end up buying the laptop. Everything will be back to normal soon, but it's just been its own little journey that we've been dealing with here. Roberto says, are you ready for the Lisp Game Jam? Still trying to set up something with Common Lisp and SDL2. I would think that Common Lisp and SDL2 would be pretty well tested at this point, but I haven't really done any Common Lisp in a while. Maybe Fade has some thoughts on that in the IRC, but I imagine it would probably work pretty well. I am not ready and I'm still not decided on what I will do. I would like to do the jam. I should do the jam because it was a lot of fun the last 2 times I did it, but I've been kind of distracted lately, so I don't exactly know if I'm actually mentally prepared for it, but we'll see. As it gets closer to time, I'll probably get more and more motivated to do it. The biggest question really is whether I'll use Guilehoot or Janet, because there's a lot of things I would like to try with Janet, and it is definitely a possibility. So we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Morgan says, ThinkPads got pretty bendy about 15 years ago. Yeah, I bought a ThinkPad, the first ThinkPad I ever bought. I want to say it was 2009, and it was still one of those that are like built like a tank. It was one of the X220 like laptops, really thick ones, but it has a screen that turns to be a tablet also, which was completely pointless. I shouldn't have bought that. It was kind of a waste. But I thought, hey, I might be able to use it to draw stuff for games or something. But yes, I never end up going back to drawing, and I suck at it. So that was a wasted purchase. But I did buy one back then, and it was a typical Lenovo or IBM ThinkPad thickness and quality. But then, you know, fast forward some years later, I bought a ThinkPad X1 Carbon, and it's pretty nice. You know, it's not bad. It held up pretty well. I did drop it on the corner, and the plastic of the corner broke off, but that's okay. I mean, it's bound to happen with any laptop. But as time goes on and the laptops get thinner and thinner, especially with like the ThinkPad X1 Nano, the internal components become very weak and easy to break. So this is the issues that I've been having with the ThinkPad X1 Nano. The USB-C jacks just are not holding up over time. And now they're totally dead. So Fade says, Common Lisp has a game engine called Trial, which has been used to deliver a commercial game. Trial, I don't know, like, is it just for 3D, or can you do 2D games with that? I like what Shirakumo is doing, or Yukari Hafner is doing with Trial and all the other stuff in the Common Lisp ecosystem. You know, it's high quality stuff. Being able to ship an actual, honest to goodness indie game on multiple platforms, including the Switch, which has not happened yet, but it will be happening. That's pretty awesome. There's also an SDL choice in a system called Sketch. Okay, that's cool. So Roberto may want to check those out. So let me know at any point if the stream is hitching or acting weird, because I kind of see some things here and there, and I'm not exactly sure what's happening. The single machine setup is rearing its ugly head as it used to, so we have that to contend with. All right, let's get into the updates, which are basically the same as the last 2 weeks because I haven't really been focusing on what's been going on in the world. So if anybody has like interesting things that they know about that happened this week and want to just shout it out in the chat, please feel free. First of all, I'll just remind you again that the hands-on Guile Scheme for Beginners course is now on demand. It was a cohort-style course in earlier iterations this year where a bunch of people started going through the course together at the same time and sort of, gradually getting through the material together. But now it's an on-demand course where you can go through it on your own pace whenever you want. There's also still a forum component where you can ask questions and share the solutions to the exercises that you worked on. So it's still a cool experience, I think, and people seem to be getting some value out of it. So I just wanted to point that out for anybody who wants to learn Scheme, functional programming, or specifically Guile Scheme. That's a good way to do that. So check out the page. There's some information there about it. And you could send me an email, ask questions about it too if you have any questions about it. So I'd be happy to answer them. Next, as Roberto mentioned in the chat, the Autumn Lisp Game Jam is coming later this month, October 25th. It's a 10-day experience, if you want to call it that, where a bunch of nerds start working on games in various different Lisp languages, either bespoke or well-known, to build a game within 10 days. And the rules are not super stringent. It's a lot less difficult than Ludum Dare or other game jams that are really tight on time frame, etc. You got 10 days, so it's pretty good. Actually, yeah, it's 10 days, right? A lot of fun. I think I'm like 80% sure that I'll do it. I may not stream the whole thing. I don't really know yet how that's going to go, but we'll see soon because I can't really resist a game jam. Hey, Dave. Candria is a 2D game. That's a good point, actually. It's probably got 3D aspects to it in how it does layers and stuff. But yes, you're right. Candria is a 2D game. Trial does both. Cool stuff. Yeah, I haven't really looked into Trial. I know that Trial has some pretty, modern, sophisticated game engine features. So it's certainly worth looking at, even if for an educational exercise to look at how a good performance game engine would be written in a Lisp. All right. So today, I wanted to just have a cozy little discussion stream to discuss something interesting that I came across on the Fediverse. I think it was this week. Maybe it was last week. Can't remember. And I don't remember who posted about this. I don't know how I found it. But there is a gun. No, you didn't miss that much. There is a manifesto, and you know that I love a good manifesto. I just can't resist reading manifestos and, coming up with my own conclusions about what the contents of those manifestos are. This one is called the Brutalist Programming Manifesto, which sounds pretty, rock and roll, sounds pretty awesome. And even the document itself is a text file that has literal concrete blocks of text. So it's pretty intense. It's not very long though, so we're not gonna have to slog through a huge document. We're just gonna kind of go through this and sort of just examine the ideas that are in it and see what we agree with, what we disagree with, and see if maybe there's anything inspiring there that you can take to your own projects, or maybe it can help you to clarify your own views about writing software as a hacker or a crafter, let's say, one of these designations. Basically a person who's coding for fun and to solve their own problems, maybe the problems of other people, but not really doing it in an overly commercialized way. When I say commercialized, I don't really mean that it's for money. I mean more that you're trying to fluff something up to a level that it doesn't really need to be just to solve the problems that people have. There's a lot of marketing driven software development out in the world where programs are made to look really flashy whenever they don't really need to be that flashy. You could probably just have a command line tool that does most of the stuff, like FFmpeg compared to Final Cut Pro, for instance. So we're going to read through this, not really line by line per se, but we will stop and examine the various different points being made and put our own spin on things as well. There's something else I wanted to say. Oh, this is written by someone with a very cool domain name, callwithcurrentcontinuation.org. I don't know if this person is a scheme hacker. His name is Felix Winkelmann. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Gunn can correct me. But yes, that is a very scheme domain name. And I'm trying to see, let's see, what software has Felix written? Another scheme compiler? Oh, Bones. All right, cool. Oh, wait, so is it the person that wrote Chicken? Okay, well, there you go. So the author of my most hated scheme implementation, only because of the name. I don't hate Chicken Scheme, I just, the name bothers me a little bit. But the author of Chicken Scheme wrote this, all right? And also Bones, another scheme compiler. I actually had run into this, and I thought it was pretty cool, but I don't remember much about it. But anyway, the point here is that it is the author of these things. Oh, also kind of interesting that this shows up here, a fourth system for the UXN virtual machine. I don't know how many of you have heard about UXN. I almost covered this today, but I had a little trouble getting it working. It actually is packaged for geeks, but we might cover this next week because it's kind of an interesting project. It's basically a virtual machine for a personal computing stack, which is kind of relevant to the topics we cover here. So we'll talk about that again, maybe next week if I have time to get it all fleshed out, but certainly worth looking into. Anyway, point being, this person has definitely hacked on some pretty interesting projects, and it'll be interesting to see what they have to say about their Brutalist Programming Manifesto. One little side note on this, if you don't know what Brutalism is, let's look it up because I can't really tell you myself the accurate definition. It is an architectural style that emerged during the 1950s in the UK, characterized by minimalist constructions that showcase bare building materials and structural elements over decorative design. So basically you would almost call it function over form in some ways. The buildings typically look pretty ugly, almost prison-like. but they also are interesting looking in their own regard because they typically have these kind of geometric features. So I think the parallel being drawn here is that you're writing software that's not meant to be the most beautiful thing in the world. You're actually just trying to solve a problem and focus on function over form. Big Edie says, when this stream was called Examining the Brutalist Programming Manifesto, I thought we were going to go through your Emacs Geeks config. Yeah, it would be pretty brutal, wouldn't it? Is it not called that? Oh, it is called that. Okay. All right. Is that it? Is that the best way to describe this? The style commonly makes use of exposed, unpainted concrete or brick, angular geometric shapes, and a predominantly monochrome color palette. Sounds delicious, doesn't it? Soviet realist architecture. It is kind of like that. This somehow reminds me of something I saw in Call of Duty last year. I don't know why. Okay, anyway, point being, we're going to go over this manifesto and see what we think about it. I'm going to pull this, though, into a buffer in Emacs so we don't have to be reading a browser tab the whole time. Cal says, it kind of looks like the 1900s idea of a totalitarian state's bureaucracy buildings, Ministry of Truth kind of stuff. I love it. Hard-coded. That's not a good thing, though. It's not really a good thing. I mean, you're basically saying that you want Darth Vader to be the designer of all the buildings in your city, and for them all to be flanked with scary-looking flags that strike fear into the hearts of any who would be so brave to dissent. Fade says, I feared my tethered phone is not powerful enough to keep up with the stream. That's unfortunate. Okay. All right, so let's get into it. The Brutalist Programming Manifesto. Number 1, simplicity is essential. I mean, on the face of that, I can agree. We always prefer the simple and short over the complex and long. And I think the perspective here is the Brutalist programmer, we being the Brutalist programmers who adhere to this manifesto. So we always prefer the simple and short over the complex and long. I might break this up a little bit too, because there are too many sentences in here. It needs some paragraphification, if you could say it that way. When we have the choice between simple or concise, we choose the simpler solution as long as we come nearer to our goal. And that's kind of interesting. Choosing between simple or concise. So what's the difference between simple and concise? Concise would mean that it is a shorter distance to the goal, I suppose, but maybe making something more concise makes it more complicated in some cases. Probably not in every case, but maybe it is. It can be more complicated or more conceptually dense, I would say. Ashra says switch to EWW. I can't edit an EWW buffer. Maybe I'll zoom it in a little bit. So text scale increase. Let's do that. Is that better? Can you see it? All right. It is easy to pay lip service to simplicity, but few have the courage to really embrace it as we fear our fellow programmers' verdict. So are you saying that your fellow programmers are going to judge you if you do something in a simple way? Maybe that's what's being proposed here. It's easy to pay lip service to simplicity, but few have the courage to really embrace it as we fear our fellow programmers' verdict. Maybe what's being said here is that if you don't try to implement the conceptually interesting or complex solution, that people think you're stupid or something. Like maybe you're not smart enough to do it. Cal says you should link to this one too. Maybe worse is better. Yeah, that's another sort of parallel line of thought, I think. When you have the impression that an adequate solution to a problem is beyond your capabilities, simplify the problem. And that's more of an interesting point, I think. When you have the impression that an adequate solution to a problem is beyond your capabilities, simplify the problem. So instead of trying to implement a solution that is too complex or difficult, maybe rethink the problem and try. Benoit says David is a brutalist programmer. No, it's not me. We're trying to decide if we are brutalist programmers. Which, this is just a concept someone came up with. I don't really think that we are one thing or another, but in this case, we're just, examining these ideas and just seeing what we agree with or what we don't agree with. So simplify the problem instead of trying to go for a more complex solution. Certainly, but sometimes problems can't be simplified too much. maybe sometimes problems are inflated due to incorrect expectations. Like, for instance, maybe you think your program is supposed to make it possible to, like, maybe you have an editor, text editor of some sort, and you think that you should build in functionality to synchronize files between multiple machines. Well, maybe that's not your editor's problem to solve. Maybe that's another tool's problem to solve. And if you focus on only the problems that are very close to the domain of the program that you're writing, and not other things that are sort of related but not directly impacted by the current program, then you should just sort of not focus on this problem. Maybe that's part of what's being said here, I think. But I think it's talking more about a problem that's beyond your capabilities, which sounds more like maybe it's something you can't do yet. But I guess both of those things are relevant. Or it's like two ways to look at the same thing. If you're not really ready to write a certain type of code, but you really need to solve a problem, then maybe you should simplify the problem you're trying to solve so that at least some of it gets solved, right? Cal says, maybe it's about preventative programming. People predict the evolution of the program and implement stuff right at the start instead of keeping it simple. So that is actually covered here at some point in a minute. Ashra says, a simple solution that works on 80% of all data well is better than a non-existing theoretical perfect solution that will take years. 100% agree on that. That's definitely the trap that a lot of programmers fall into, especially at companies, where that massive feature creep of, oh, we might need it later, or we should design this API to be extensible, or this interface to be extensible in case we want to have something later or whatever. A lot of times you don't need that until V2, version 2. Like, the first version of any piece of software should not be focused on extensibility. It should be focused on fleshing out the problem space and understanding the problems you're solving and how people will actually use the program. Because the more abstraction that you inject into your program or the framework you're writing or whatever, the more complicated it's going to be, and the more difficult it's going to be to change whenever you realize that your assumptions were all wrong, which is going to happen because programming is not an exact science, and I would dare say it's not engineering either, because in a lot of cases, you're really just shooting in the dark. You have some assumptions and some ideas about how things should work, and you implement them, and then you put it in front of a real human being who's not you, who doesn't have the same biases and expectations that you have, and then they start doing things completely differently, and you're like, why are you doing it that way? Well, it's because another person has a completely different mental model than you do, and maybe you need to step back and be a little bit more empathetic to the fact that other brains exist in the world, not just yours. Sorry, that was a rant. So, definitely not going too far into trying to overgeneralize at first is important. I think that actually will be talked about here. Big Edie says, is Emacs brutalist? It feels somewhat brutalist, maybe. Maybe we can talk about that later, after we have fully examined this. So we need to understand what brutalist really means in the context of this document, or we can really answer that question, I think. Let's see. It says, see also early optimization. Yeah. Edge Crusher says, okay, but what about brutalist programming with 2 zeros? Does that involve having some edgy elite hacker theme on your editor while having some 2006 era MySpace deathcore in the background? I imagine it more like, you know, playing Korn, the first Korn album, and drinking a Surge at 3 in the morning and jamming out some code. Maybe you're using the BitchX IRC client and you're feeling really, you know, smug. You're hanging out in a Dalnet chat room and harassing all the noobs who drop by. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. Let me check the YouTube chat. Gun says, David is using parens instead of braces or brackets, so it's anything but brutal. Yeah, I guess you're right, Gun. Lisp, by definition, cannot be brutalist because it's not angular enough. So maybe what we need is to change a Lisp to use square brackets or angle brackets. Probably square brackets would be best. Obviously, in Scheme, you can kind of interchange square brackets, but we need to change a Scheme or a Lisp to be more effectively brutalist by making it be more blocky and not so rounded, you know, rounded and welcoming and warm as it currently is. Jonathan says, I've been working with designing programs with ChatGPT, doing the hardest part of the problem first, descending. Hickory says, your video is next to Brutal Doom video. Is that Brutal Doom in terms of Doom the video game? Because that would be awesome. I'd be very happy to rank next to a Doom video. Not a Doom Emacs video, a Doom the video game video. All right. Where was I? Jonathan was talking about getting ChatGPT to write some things. I mean, yeah, it's certainly possible, but ChatGPT can also get things wrong. Cal says, I don't know what I'm talking about. David will, knowing what you're talking about. Yeah, I might be speaking from personal experience with that anecdote. Not really, but, you know, when you grow up on, you know, mid-90s internet, you see some things. Maybe you experience some things personally. Let's see. Yeah, Big Edie is talking about how he's getting Emacs to crash. Yeah, I heard about that. Dave says, come on, have you ever seen a box and arrows diagram of a Lisp list? Well, that's pretty horrifying. I mean, you're basically drawing out a diagram for const cells, which is not so good. Okay, so back to the document. Where are we? All right, complex code is not an achievement, nor does it make us better programmers. Yeah, I agree with that. Just because something is complex doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do. Now, something that's complex may have been fun to write. There's always the idea of hack value. There we go, Cathedral in the Bazaar website. That's great. Yes, often adduced as the reason or motivation for expending effort toward a seemingly useless goal, which I would say, you know, sometimes whenever you are awake at 12:47 a.m. and you're still hacking on your Emacs or Geeks configuration, you start to wonder, what is it that you're really trying to accomplish? And it seems kind of useless, but then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you start all over again. Anyway, the point being that the accomplished goal is a hack. For example, MacLisp had features for reading and printing Roman materials. Wow, I really can't read. Numerals, which were installed purely for hack value. Yes, nobody really needed that, but they just did it for fun probably, which is not a great idea in a lot of cases. Okay, so if you're a programmer and you want to write something for fun, do it. It's awesome. But don't start adding features to a program that other people use just because you think it's cute or fun, because you're going to add a bunch of crap that nobody needs. So you're just going in the complete opposite direction at that point. Nobody really needs the ability to treat Roman numerals as integers in a program or programming language, in my opinion, unless for some reason you're writing programs that are supposed to be like taking financial ledgers from ancient Rome or something. And turning those into programs. I don't know. Does it sound like somebody would actually do that? Maybe somebody will now. I don't know. It won't be me. As Louis Armstrong once said when asked to explain jazz, man, if you got to ask, you'll never know. Well, that's a little bit weird. If you got to ask, you'll never know. I mean, sure, that's a little bit gatekeepy, though. I think many people can understand the allure of working on something that seems kind of stupid to do, but it's fun, right? We're all here mainly for that reason, I think. Okay, let me check the chat here. Fade, definition of brutalism, make it as simple as possible and no simpler, pretty much the motto of every talented senior engineer. Yeah, I think that as engineers get old, they get tired of all of the faffing about, I guess you could say, and they just want things to work. And you realize that the more weird stuff you put in the code, the easier it will break and the harder it is to maintain. So you're kind of like, maybe I don't need all this extra stuff. I would rather just write simple functions that take in data structures and return values or data structures without, having to get into complicated things like class hierarchies and other fun stuff like that. Maybe that's just my bias talking. The way that I write JavaScript is pretty damn basic. Like, I'm writing functions that take data structures or just plain parameters and return stuff in a lot of cases. Benoit says suck less seems kind of brutalist. Yeah, that's 100% brutalist for sure. They're trying to keep all the crap out of the program, down to the point where they're making you compile it yourself, which is a little bit gatekeepy, but at the same time, for what they're trying to do, like they're basically trying to remove the need for even configuration files. You just configure it by changing the code, which honestly I think is a pretty reasonable thing to do, and it can be the entry point for someone to use a compiler for the first time to compile a program and get that feeling of, wow, I actually took this code and turned it into a binary and executed it. And then I went and made a change to the code and recompiled it and then ran the binary and saw the change. So that kind of feedback loop, almost like writing Emacs Lisp in Emacs, can be an important gateway into creating more programmers. So even though suck less is a little bit elitist and a little bit hardcore at times, I think that there may be some value to it so long as people don't pick up the wrong kind of mentality while doing that. Ashra says, you mean usual Wells Fargo financial reports? Did they use Roman numerals in their reports? That would be pretty funny, actually. Let's see. Dave says, having to recompile to make config changes is not simple, in my opinion. Simplicity has many factions, certainly. Simplicity can mean different things to different people, but that's fine. I don't think there's a problem with there being different definitions of simplicity, because everybody will sort of gravitate toward the solutions that work best for them, or at least solutions that are interesting enough that they are willing to try it to see if it works best for them. Yeah, Ashrat says simple is not equal to easy. Yeah, it's definitely also not the case. Didn't Rich Hickey have a talk about that? Or he had a talk called Simple Made Easy, Rich Hickey. I feel like, did that talk about that though? Rich Hickey emphasizes simplicity's virtues over easiness. That while many choose easiness, they may end up with complexity. Yeah, well, easiness does end up with complexity in a lot of cases. I know it's not what Dave said, but easiness does end up with complexity, because to make it possible to make a program very easy to configure, a lot of times you have to do a lot of work behind the scenes in the program to enable that. But that may be more of a manifestation of poor design than the consequences of making something easy. So I don't know. Dave says, like, the whole indie web movement is very much not my type of simple. Yeah, because I think I'm not 100% sure what they are striving for, but it seems like it's like programs that are easy just to run and you don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance on them or whatever. Ashra says, what's indie web? It's this thing that people do. That's a good explanation, right? Independent and personal websites, but I think they're trying to make it easier for non-tech savvy people to do it. Benoit says, easy is what you know. Simple is the opposite of complex or not intertwined. Easy is what you know. Maybe. Maybe. Cal says, Dave, I thought you're indie web. I don't know. Can't really say that, can you? I mean, being into Federation, not the same thing. Anyway, it's an interesting thing. I've read through this stuff a little bit at various points, but yeah, like Dave said, not really for me either. Okay, code that cannot be thrown away is automatically technical debt and a burden. That's an interesting little point. Are we going too slow? Maybe I'm opining too much here and we need to move faster, but I think we're getting some good talk out of this. Let me check on the YouTube side too. Ah, yes, Feeker says it's a Doom mod. That's good enough. I'm happy to know that we're showing up next to a video about a Doom mod. So code that cannot be thrown away is automatically technical debt and a burden. So I think the point here is that any code that gets to be too complex and you have too many other pieces of code depending on it becomes a liability, because then you're building on top of kind of a platform or framework that you've made that you then have to maintain. So if you try to remove the layers of complexity and make it so that things kind of click together more as interchangeable units, while still not making it too complex from the abstraction, then it should be possible to rewrite certain components of a program without really affecting the overall program. It's kind of hard to do that though. Can't do it with every type of program, but if you're working on simple programs, it is possibly easier to do that. Also, I would say that if you're writing programs for yourself or for a smaller user base, it can be fun to just rewrite stuff to make it better, especially if you learn things from the first time you wrote it. It'd be fun to rewrite things. So, enjoyment of writing code could be a factor here. If implementation artifacts influence the external appearance or usage of a program, then this is acceptable as long as it doesn't impede the program's usefulness. Okay, if implementation artifacts influence the external appearance or usage of a program, this is acceptable as long as it doesn't impede the program's usefulness. So basically, if the way that you've implemented things does not make the program less useful, it's fine. The external appearance, I guess, is like the user experience, right? This one's not quite as clear to me. Nakatani says, adding the complexity of Rust just makes things complicated in another place. That was sort of the C guy's point. Oh, okay. Reminds me of the Rust C Linux kernel discussion from a month ago. I don't know if I read that one. Okay. I'm starting to see more and more people get pulled over to the common Lisp side in the System Crafters community. That's kind of interesting. I'm going to have to pay more attention to what's happening there. I think Fade must be going and like paying people to try common Lisp or something. Just kidding. Just kidding. Fade says 96.7% of being a senior on whatever team is being able to cut through the complexity that is essential and separate it from the complexity that is intrinsic or accidental. I feel like if you are sufficiently experienced as a programmer, you had to do that so many times, maybe poorly, but you've had to do that so many times that your radar for unnecessary complexity just gets really zoned in, and you get a lot better at that. So it's almost natural at that point where you're just kind of like, okay, this is a huge mess. Let's just clean it up, make it simpler so that we don't have to have these headaches all the time. Dave says, PHP being at all acceptable is a good example of where indie web types and ideas diverge. I've recently come to have an appreciation for the web programming languages of yore, like PHP, Ruby for Ruby on Rails, etc. I haven't actually gone and used PHP. I played with Ruby on Rails a little bit recently, but it says common Lisp programmers are just more handsome. This makes things easier for us. Okay, I don't think that's actually what's happening. I think common Lisp has better. Okay, let me be very careful of how I say this. Common Lisp has a more fleshed out ecosystem, and it's easier to get things done. Now Kotani says something that sounds very, very sketchy, but I'm pretty sure you're referring to David Nolan. So yeah, that one's a little bit. That's a risky comment. Better tooling. I don't know about better tooling. I would say better ecosystem, better library. More libraries for various things. The problem with Scheme is that everything is diffused across so many different implementations, and there's enough differences between implementations, and not all of them really, fully implement like R7RS, R6RS to the extent that you can have truly portable libraries. I mean, it actually does. Okay, Nakatani says Rich has a big hairdo. Okay, cool. That's fine. But you totally hit my train of thought. Okay, I'm back. So it's difficult to have, really good libraries that kind of go across scheme implementations. It would be nice if there was really just like one tried and true best case scheme implementation that everybody could kind of focus on. Guile could be that at some point in the future. Shay's scheme, I feel like it's so good, but at the same time, it's not as easy to use as you think it would be. I've tried to do some things with Shay's scheme, and it didn't really work out like I thought. Racket is great, but we talked about Racket before. I kind of feel like it's kind of going off in a different direction. It's not really like a good scheme environment. It's meant to be something else. So we need a good central scheme implementation, which I know kind of defeats the purpose of having a language spec and having multiple implementations, but you really kind of need to have a place where everybody can kind of go and write programs and have really good support for stuff. So anyway, I digress. I'm just saying that's one reason why Common Lisp, actually Common Lisp has that too. Common Lisp has SBCL that most people use. So Scheme needs an analog to SBCL. I think that's the point I was trying to get across. Dave says, I feel like I'm screaming into the void, but the emphasis on standardized scheme is a big waste of time. Treat scheme as a family of closely related but distinct languages and pick your favorite. I mean, that's what people have to do right now. They have to do it already. And I agree with you. I think that there needs to be a really damn good scheme implementation that people can get behind, be really excited about, and feel like, okay, this is the best representation of scheme, and then there can be a whole ecosystem of tools built around it. Guile is probably one of the front runners on that because of the fact that there are already a lot of libraries and a lot of built-in functionality in Guile itself. All right, we're getting really off track now. Let me check the YouTube chat. Minas Mazer. Hey, Minas Mazer. I forgot to tell you hello earlier. It says, I used to love Ruby. Now I love Elixir. I've not really looked into Elixir at all. Fade says, multiple incompatible implementations are not constituting a self-reinforcing ecosystem. Yes, I agree with that. Glenn says, David Will told me my favorite scheme is Guile. Well, I mean, it's basically, it's the one that is the most effective for us because it's used for geeks. If you want to use geeks, that is. Let's see. Benoit says, isn't the thin core and adding so much surfy flexibility is what makes schemes so complex in the end and not interchangeable? Yeah, that is a lot of it. The thing that I don't like about the whole surfy model is that it's really hard to say what the idiomatic style of writing scheme is, because the only way you can really say what's idiomatic in scheme is to focus literally on the R7RS small spec, because that's the only thing that would be immediately portable across all things. Maybe like Surfy 1, maybe some of the other really common Surfies, but even by that point, those should be part of the main spec, which I think is kind of what they're doing with the R7RS large, is like to provide a more complete practical programming standard library. But yeah, when you can't have like idiomatic patterns that are not just, you know, plain scheme code, it's difficult to make I don't know, to have a solid ecosystem, let's say. All right, so don't underestimate the effort to write simple code. Complex technology can never be simplified by, these are all like individual statements. This should just be broken out into like verses, let's say, almost like a Bible or something. Not huge brutalist style paragraphs, which are not paragraphs, they're just blocks of sentences. Don't underestimate the effort to write simple code. Well, yeah, you got to think. Simplification requires a lot more thinking than just writing a bunch of crap. Complex technology can never be simplified by adding more complex technology. Oh yeah, of course. Can't make something complex more simple by making it more complex. I think that is a tautology, as they say. Creating the computational equivalent of a Rube Goldberg device is something that you should consider a practical joke or something to be ashamed of, never something to take pride in. So you mean something like these, Java dependency injection frameworks, et cetera, these kinds of things? Spring, I don't really know what Spring is. Let's see. Benoit says, that makes David a preacher. I'm missing something. Dave says, I'm a Guile programmer. I don't care about chicken or shay or whatever. Guile is a distinct language in my mind that can speak a smaller language called R whatever RS scheme. Yeah, for sure. All right. If you can't explain the internal structure of a software system to someone in a day, then you may have a complexity problem. Some of the complexity may be necessary, but it's still a serious defect. Okay. So, I kind of agree with this, but it's kind of arbitrary saying to explain it in a day, because a day is still a long time. I would think that you should be able to convey the high-level model of a software system to someone in an hour. Not necessarily to give them the full details about how it's implemented or how everything fits together necessarily, but like, even if it's something super complicated, you should be able to explain how things fit together. SCS copy says, David hit a meta E to go to the end of the sentence. Yes, thank you. Let me see. Having a hard time. There we go. Oh, is someone copying YouTube chat over to IRC? If you are, thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, okay. Benoit says, I referred to you saying these should be verses. Yes. Well, okay. I don't want to be seen like I'm preaching the Brutalist Programming Manifesto. Ashraz, you don't need to write a bot because that's what the restream bot's for. If I were to get the Twitch IRC bridge working again, then all this would be fixed. But I just haven't gone back to that. Fade says, when I'm trying to understand a complex problem, I give a chalk talk on it to myself. Yes. I open up an org document and just start writing down everything I can think of. And this is what I usually tell anybody who's trying to work through hard problems. You need to write it down and explain it to yourself, because that's how you will illuminate the missing parts of all the information. And you can finally like get it out of your head and look at it instead of like going over everything in your mind. Because if you try to do that, if you try to just do everything inside your head, you don't really have, well, sometimes it's not easy to get a foothold on the information or on the thought process. So you really need to put it somewhere. So for some people, putting it on a whiteboard or a chalkboard or whatever is the best way to do it. Some people, it's writing on a piece of paper, drawing on a piece of paper. For me, it's typing it in a document kind of like this. I have so many denote notes where I'm just kind of talking through a technical problem, a personal problem, anything like that. So it's really the best way to structure your thinking, I think. All right. Some of the complexity may be necessary, but it is still a serious defect. Okay, sure. Solve problems instead of creating them. Well, you know, I think that is just a rule for life. Instead of creating problems for yourself and for all the people who are close to you, maybe try to solve a couple of them instead of creating more. Because if you just create problems, then they're just getting more problems and you don't have any being solved. So yeah, I kind of agree with that. That could just be used across the board. Is this like a brutalist life manifesto now? We're just going to tell people how to clean their toilet and make sure that they buy their groceries and pay their taxes on time. Don't create problems for yourself. Ashra says, even temporary pieces of paper are great. Simple solution for caching for the mind. Yeah, for sure. Dave says, my manifesto will be bold and say, create problems instead of solving them. You should be a politician. That's the last I'll say on that topic. All right. So, half done with the stream, 1/12 done with the manifesto. We're kind of like halfway done. Come on, Big Edie. All right. We want to solve concrete problems. So that's kind of a funny little pun. considering we're talking about the Brutalist Programming Manifesto. Concrete problems, not anticipate the tasks others might have in the future, so we create applications instead of frameworks. I like that. Now, on some level, I don't like that because, you know, a lot of my actual career and projects have been writing frameworks and libraries and abstractions. But I do agree that if the goal is to ultimately write an application that a person can use to solve a problem or to streamline a process to affect the workflow, then to start with, it's probably better just to focus on writing the application to solve the immediate problems that you know that someone has, rather than trying to imagine what future problems they may or may not have. Because you're going to make a lot of assumptions and you're going to go too far with your implementation or your design, and then it's going to be hard to step back from that whenever you realize that a lot of that stuff was never going to happen. So instead of trying to predict the future and be clever and solve things that may not need to be solved yet, just write what needs to be written. And then later, maybe, once you see that there are categories of problems that can be generalized and there are actual use cases for it, then you can go and try to generalize the code that you already have, introduce those frameworks, abstractions, etc. Fade says that Cal is right. This is dancing on the table set by worse is better. Yep. Gunn says resembles the Unix philosophy. Nakatani says write an application if you need an application. Don't write a framework when you need an application. I guess this is what this means. Yeah, which means that if you're a game developer, don't write another game engine, which I can't follow that because all I want to do is write a game engine and not a game. So I don't know. There's a balance, right? There's a balance between doing things that might be fun and doing things that solve an actual problem. And they don't have to really overlap, but you shouldn't try to make them overlap. Like if you're trying to solve a problem for someone, don't then go try to do all the fun stuff to make the thing complicated, because then you're making everybody's life more difficult. You're making your life more difficult because the code is harder to maintain, and you're making the user's life more difficult because the software might be more complex to use. Ashra says, unless you want to write a game engine. Yeah, game engine is kind of the cheat code because everybody decides they want to write a game engine. I think everybody decides they want to write a text editor too, don't they? At some point. And everybody wants to write a programming language. Everybody wants to write a compiler. Maybe I'm just talking for myself here. All right. Hello to Robin. I saw that Robin joined the chat. Dave says, if it's your free time, write that engine. Yes, if it's for your own personal consumption or game jams, definitely write that engine. But if you're trying to ship a game to make money, maybe don't write your own engine unless you've used a bunch of engines and you have a good reason to write your own engine. Benoit says, depends on the motivations. For fun, hell yeah. For serious stuff, yeah, don't write yet another framework when you can either reuse one or don't need one at all. Yeah, that's also another thing. Like, do you need a framework? Can you just use a library directly? Fade says, life is too short to be writing boring code unless you're getting paid very well to do it. Yep, that's true. Nakatani says, I wanted to write a game engine and then I got 3 lines into the OpenGL docs. Yeah, that is kind of a pain sometimes. Ashra says, at work, I'm the guy who says, no, don't do that. If we need that, we'll add another ticket. Yeah, so that's the best way to shoot down the hopes and dreams of any overeager programmer at your job. If they say like, oh, we should do this and this. All right, go file issues for all those things. Go file work items for all of those things. And then they'll be like, okay, I'll get to that. And maybe they'll never get to it. Because that's what I would do. I would never go file those things because who wants to spend their time filing work items? Not me. Okay, we write editors, not text editing toolkits. We write games instead of engines. Ooh, there it is. Let's see. We do not generalize unnecessarily as we will never be able to fully comprehend how our code might be used. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. You can't really know how your code or your program is going to be used until it's out in the world and people use it and they start yelling at you because something doesn't work. So instead of working too hard and doing the wrong stuff, do what's sort of the bare minimum and see if people use it. And if they use it, they'll tell you what to do. Trev says, what the heck, Dave is sick again? I'm still sick, dude. It's been like 3 weeks now. It's been 3 weeks, and it's not going away. So who knows what this is? Okay, so we do not generalize unnecessarily as we... Okay, yeah. Moreover, we often evade our responsibility to solve actual problems by procrastinating and conceiving one-size-fits-all pseudo-solutions for future generations that will probably never use them. Well, yes. That is kind of like the tried and true technique for procrastination for programmers. Because you don't want to just write the damn functionality, you're like, how can I make this fun? Let's just make it into a framework that nobody needs. And now everybody has to maintain. Cal says, these manifestos seem to be like what every programmer comes to realize with programming maturity. Yeah, for sure. I guess it's a way for a programmer to internalize the life lessons that they have come across in their journey dealing with legacy code and I guess their own inclinations. Nakatani says, reduce incidental complexity equals crushed dreams. Well, sometimes you do need to crush the dreams because the dreams are gonna like shipwreck everyone. Life lessons generations of coders keep forgetting. Well, that's the thing, man. Programming is a weird trade because it's one of the few trades where there's almost zero downside to wasting work. If you're a carpenter, you can't just go like build a bunch of crazy stuff and waste wood because wood costs money. But with programming, you can just write code all day and night and write a bunch of crap code and have all kinds of cockamamie plans about what kinds of things you want to do and go execute those. And they end up being wasted time, which time is a very valuable resource, but it doesn't really seem like you're wasting time because you think at the moment, oh, this is going to be a great thing. So younger programmers who are really excited about programming can waste a ton of time not really, heeding the life lessons of the programmers who came before and just go off and try to do a whole bunch of stuff. But maybe that's part of the journey. I don't know. Programming is also a trade where I call it a trade because I'm trying to minimize the perception of programming. It's not software engineering. This is programming. I'm no more of an engineer than I am a chef. So I once again lost my train of thought. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's really no incentive to follow best practices whenever you're a young programmer because you're really just eager to do it. And it's fun. Nakatani says, sometimes you do need to crush the dreams, attributing that quote to me. Yeah, sometimes you do need to crush the dreams. Whenever it's in a business setting and you have to get work done and someone's trying to screw around and delay the whole project because they wanted to implement a new class hierarchy or rewrite a component in another language or switch out the database engine or use Vue.js instead of React or any of the many other things that a person could do foolishly thinking that it's going to be a good idea, but it really never is. All right. Livestock, not pets. I don't know. I mean, in the case of professional software development, not engineering, software development, you definitely need to be less precious about programming, which is the sad realization of people who like programming is eventually you have to realize that it's not for your enjoyment whenever you're being paid to write code at a company. It's for you to solve the problems that the company has and to do it efficiently and at the least amount of cost to them, which, what I've seen is that there's a lot of wasted time and cost in developing software, but it's kind of, it's absorbed because, this is kind of difficult work to do. So sometimes you kind of got to let people slack a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to be too much pressure and they're going to crack. Sis says, I want to write text editing toolkits. Well, do it. If you want to write a text editing toolkit to have fun, do it. There's no problem with that. I think this document is more concerned with software that other people will use. So I think there's a very kind of fundamentalist perspective here about solving problems. There's a difference between solving problems and being really hardcore about solving problems than there is about sort of being creative with programming. If you're really religious about solving problems, you're going to try to get rid of everything that doesn't help solve a problem with code. And I think that's basically what this document's getting at. All right. So we instead identify a problem that might be addressed by a computerized solution and do nothing but working towards that solution. Okay. We do not create abstractions for abstraction's sake, but to simplify our current task. Yeah. Well, I believe that one is something that you end up realizing as an experienced programmer. Don't just go make a class hierarchy or, a complicated internal framework when you don't need it. If a function will take care of the job, and maybe passing around functions will take care of the job, just do that. Just do something simple, because in the end, you will get way more done. You'll solve way more problems. You will implement a full program much faster if you don't waste time on building sandcastles that really are only going to be admired by you and probably not even by your teammates, because they're going to hate you for wasting time trying to invent some new abstraction that then they have to learn. Because anytime you invent some abstraction or framework, what you're doing is adding new concepts to the programming language in a sense. I mean, it's not like a DSL where you're literally adding new concepts to a language like in a Lisp where you have macros. That's kind of adding new concepts to a language. But when you add an abstraction, now you've got this conceptual model that someone has to put into their head so they can write code effectively inside of that model in the program, really. So you're creating more work for everyone. If it's just you write a function and you pass a function to another function, that's pretty damn easy to understand, right? It's not so hard to understand. But if you got like a dependency injection framework and you got all these interface implementations and you don't really know where they're coming from, and maybe they're being created based on the contents of a YAML file, and you don't really need all that stuff, then you're making it so that everybody has to learn all this extra crap whenever it could have just been really simple stuff. So that's kind of what that means. We don't create abstractions for abstraction's sake, but to simplify our current task. Don't do it just because you saw it in some other program or framework. I think we're all guilty of this at some point. You kind of saw like some other program had this really cool way of expressing configuration and making things really switchable inside the program. Most programs don't need that. And probably the program that had that had a damn good reason to add it, because maybe they needed to be super flexible. Maybe it wasn't like that in the beginning. But if you go and try to start your program, like, okay, before I do anything else, I need to implement this crazy configuration system where I can just turn knobs on and off all the time, then you're never gonna solve the problem. You're just gonna be sitting there writing a framework for your program the whole day. All right. So we got a few more here. How much time we got left? Not enough. Cal says, you rarely whistle somehow. Your microphone, maybe some interaction. It's the squeaking of the mic stand, I think. Excuse me, folks, here. I'm drowning, it sounds like. All right, so we are not smarter than others. Others are usually not smarter. That sounds like a paradoxical statement. We are not smarter than others, but others are usually not smarter than us either. So maybe we're kind of more on the same level. Is that what we're saying here? Faith says, in every system I write, I always include a function with a doc string. I bet you're wondering why this is here. I dare you to delete it. That is pretty funny, actually. Okay. We do not think of how others might judge our code. They struggle as much as we do, and they don't have any more answers to our problems than we have. So this is the empathy section of the manifesto, it seems. Like I said, this is the Brutalist Life Manifesto. I think that only the first entry was about code. Everything else is about being a human being. So what that statement is saying is, don't judge other people. Don't think other people are smarter than you. Don't worry about what they think. But you're also reading a manifesto that's very opinionated, and you're probably worrying about what this person thinks about you and whether you live up to the manifesto. So I don't know. But I guess empathy is just the buzzword here, right? QComp says, some of the complexity may be necessary, but is still a serious defect. Quoting something from earlier in the document, surely some problems are inherently complex. Yes, I agree with that. Some problems are inherently complex, but I guess that we're focused mainly on the construction of the software to solve that problem, not the problem itself. Okay. Experience is important and necessary, but creativity is too... Okay. Cool. Only beginners think they know everything. Only beginners think they know everything. Yeah, I guess the more that you learn, the more you realize, okay, there's a meme, I guess you could say, or maybe a phrase, or a saying, that if you ask I'm going to get this wrong, correct me in the chat. If you ask a junior programmer how long something is going to take to get done, they'll tell you 2 weeks. If you ask a senior level programmer how long it's going to take to get something done, they'll say it depends. And that's because the more that you learn, the more you realize that this is all basically a house of cards, and you can't really know until you get into the thick of it and see what's going to be the problem. Dave says, all I know is that I don't know. Yep. I mean, all I can really tell you is that I'm a dummy, and I'm just doing my best here, man. What can I say? Experience can lead to cynicism, but cynicism leads to emptiness. We're really getting into the Buddhist perspective here. Experience can lead to cynicism, but cynicism... Okay, experience can lead to cynicism, but cynicism leads to emptiness. So we're saying that if you become cynical, then it leads to emptiness. Well, I would say cynicism leads to burnout and wanting to leave the field, maybe. But it also can lead to some pretty good jokes. Doing something for a long time does not automatically lead to experience, but failing often does. That's a little bit of an ambiguous wording here. Failing often or failing often does. I think it means failing often does lead to experience. Excuse me. The Dunning-Kruger effect, says Ed Bowler on YouTube side. Thank you, Ashraz, for copying these over. So yes, doing something for a long time does not automatically lead to experience, but failing often does. Well, okay, so the subtext here is that if you do something for a long time, but it's always the same stuff and you're never doing anything new, then you're not going to get any real experience, because all you're going to have is this very limited view of the world. Like if all you ever write are ASP.NET line of business applications that talk to SQL Server database, then your entire worldview is going to be ASP.NET applications that talk to a SQL Server database. And you're probably not going to fail very often because you're doing things you already know how to do. So failing often implies that you're doing different things, which means that you will get more experience because you're failing and learning from failure. So, yeah. All right. True mastery transcends problems and works by intuition trained on making mistakes. I think that's a pretty general statement. Transcends problems and it works by intuition trained on making mistakes. Or in other words, the brain learns stuff and then gets smart and then do things. That's the real brutalist perspective on that. Brain gets smarter. True mastery transcends problems and works by intuition trained on making mistakes. Yeah, you have to make mistakes because you can't know everything. If we're all, geniuses and we can do everything perfectly, then what are you really learning? You already know everything. So inherently, to learn something, you have to do it wrong. I think, right? We accept that we will be journeymen eternally, and that mastership is something that is given to us by grace, not effort. Now we're getting really spiritual. Something is given to us by grace, not effort. Oh boy, that one is interesting to unpack. I'm not saying anything about the author or the way what they're trying to say here. I'm kind of like, laughing to myself about what this could imply. The point is related to flow state. Which one? The intuition? Who wrote this? Faye, the author of Chicken Scheme, and some other projects wrote this. Let's see. So we accept that we will be journeymen eternally, and that mastership is something that is given to us by grace, not by effort. Well, another way to say this is that programming is a field where many things are just sandcastles of hubris. Software systems that were created because someone thought it was a good idea. And to work effectively in the field, you have to learn a lot of stuff that you really didn't need to learn, but you just have to kind of keep relearning new things constantly because things keep changing over time, because people keep getting new harebrained ideas to reinvent the wheel and do it a different way. So you're constantly learning things because you have to. I think anybody who's worked in the field long enough, especially now, probably gets that feeling like, okay, I've been working on, Python applications for the last 10 years, but now everybody's using Go or Rust. What am I going to do? But I think that the spirit of this phrase is more about accept that you will never know everything and you should always keep trying to learn more. So I took it in a more cynical direction, but yeah, sure. But that sort of goes back to accepting that you don't know everything and you will never know everything. All right, so we don't attempt to be wizards. Well, speak for yourself. We just try to solve problems. Yeah. But it feels fun to be a wizard, right? Like to write some code that seems impossible, but it works the first try. Doesn't happen very often, but it makes you feel like a wizard. We just try to solve problems. That's another thing that happens for more experienced developers. Like maybe you're doing some things for fun, but in the end, when the rubber meets the road, you're trying to solve problems. So yeah, you're not really trying to be a wizard so much as you're trying to use your skills to create something useful. If a programmer seems to be 10x more productive as us, then perhaps because he or she masters her programming environment more than we do, doesn't bother with unnecessary things, or just has a different measure for productivity. Well, I think the most important part is doesn't bother with unnecessary things, which is sort of what a lot of this document is already talking about. And what I said earlier, you will be way more productive than other people if you don't waste time on stuff that nobody really needed to begin with. If you're solving the actual direct problems, fixing the actual bugs, and polishing software so that it just does what it's supposed to do and doesn't do any extraneous stuff, you will be way more productive because you're delivering the actual intended value of what you are creating, and not just the other things that you thought would be fun to put in, or maybe you thought would be useful in the future at some point, which is really just an unvalidated assumption on your behalf. Ed Buller says, isn't that Socrates? Can you know that you know nothing? Well, honestly, the thought that came to mind to me when I was saying that is the scene in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when they go to ancient Greece and they're listening to Socrates talk, and he's saying something. No. Either Bill or Ted are repeating Socrates, and they're talking about the only thing that you know is that you know nothing. Something like that. SLS says, are there plans for a system crafting manifesto? Maybe I need to become more of a megalomaniac before I come up with a system crafting manifesto. I don't know about that. I think that I would like to have, yes, Socrates. Dave knows what I'm talking about. I love that movie. It's awesome. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, System Crafting Manifesto. I would like to have a discussion soon about things that are important to system crafters, which are just important to people who, you know, enjoy using computers and writing code. But nothing like a manifesto. The Crafter's Manifesto. I'm gonna write a book. Big Edie says, is SCS copy a boy? SCS copy is Ashra's pretending to be a bot that's copying messages across from YouTube. Oh yes, yes, it's a fake bot. Because this is what Ashraz likes to do on the streams. He likes to just pretend to be bots of various types. Left pad. Ashraz says, I believe my most common answer on a programming question is, well, I don't know, but let's have a look. Yes. Usually for me, it's, yeah, I don't know. Let me search 15, 20 documentation pages for you and answer the question for myself first because I don't really know. All right. So yes, if a programmer seems to be 10x more productive, it's probably because they're not wasting time doing things they shouldn't be doing. And also because they're probably using Emacs. Do everything yourself. Now that one is a pretty bold statement, in my opinion. Tia Nakatani, thank you very much. Enjoy your class. All right. We do not use libraries, frameworks, or third-party packages unless we were absolutely forced to do so. Who's forcing you? Who's putting a gun to your head telling you, you must use a library for this? I mean, like, what are we, in some kind of gulag? Or a programming sweatshop where they're like, you must use React.js, otherwise you don't get to feed your family. I don't think so. We do not use libraries, frameworks, or third-party packages unless we are absolutely forced to do so. I really feel like that is an impossible statement in modern programming, like in JavaScript or Rust, because everything is a tiny package that you have to put together. But I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here. So, don't use libraries, frameworks, third-party packages. It's kind of hard to get away with that. I mean, are you going to rewrite OpenSSL for every program you write? I don't think so. I mean, I guess saying that you're absolutely forced to do so is the thing that you got to do is so complicated that you can't possibly spend time writing that. That's the whole point of using a library, is that you don't want to spend time writing that thing. You want to use something that somebody else already made. Okay, if you are trying to reach for a library or framework that you don't really need because it seems cool, or that all the cool kids are doing it, and you'll get Twitter points or X points for talking about using this library or framework, then yeah, don't do it, okay? That doesn't qualify. But you kind of need to use libraries and frameworks, third-party packages in programming because you really can't spend time writing everything yourself. SLS says, how does this fit with just solve problems? Yeah, maybe what they're trying to do is stop people from using things unnecessarily, but then you have to answer what necessary is. So I like a good write things myself type thing. I mean, I had my other channel, Flux Harmonic, where I was writing a lot of stuff sort of from scratch, but not really fully from scratch. It's fun, but it's not a practical way to write programs in a lot of cases. But I do agree that maybe you shouldn't over rely on libraries or frameworks, or you shouldn't pick libraries or frameworks for misguided reasons. Code that we didn't write, we do not understand. Sure. So these two kind of go together. Code that we didn't write, we do not understand. Code that we do not understand, we cannot maintain. Here's another one. This is the third corollary. Code that we cannot maintain may change from version to version or may not work with another version of a dependency of that code or the underlying platform that it runs on. Whew. I need a breath after that one. Wait. Code that we did not write, we do not understand. Code that we do not understand, we cannot maintain. Well, maybe you don't have to maintain it. Maybe it's a library that's existed for 20 years and it works pretty well at this point. You don't have to do anything to it, just use it. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, how common is that? Maybe. Benoit says, well, if you can't read code, you should not code. Yeah, I think that we all end up inheriting some code at some point or another. It's just kind of the nature of the game, right? Code that we cannot maintain may change from version to version or may not work with another version of a dependency of that code. Yeah, sure, that's definitely a problem. I mean, if you depend on a library, they can break you at any time. No matter what their semantic versioning numbers are saying to you, they can break you at any time, especially if you're writing JavaScript and using NPM packages. That would just be a headache no matter what. But I don't think that means don't depend on other code. But I do think there's a balance, and I think maybe what's being expressed here is that you need to carefully measure the balance of depending on things that can break you or your users versus the value that you get out of them. Because if you can solve problems faster, more precisely, more robustly by using a library, even if there's a risk that at some point it could break you, then you kind of have to take that risk. Also, many libraries that people use these days are open source or free software. So you don't have to really, okay. Depending on the type of system you're on, you don't have to be so dependent on someone not breaking a library. But on Linux, since sort of the way that GNU systems are set up, where they have shared libraries for everything, you can definitely be broken by a change to a library or an upgrade to a library that your program depends on. So in Linux, you definitely don't have as much control over that. On Windows, maybe on Mac OS, you have more control over that. But yeah, Fade says control your dependencies, and Ashra says, yeah, control is the important part if you can. I mean, you can statically link libraries into your code. LeftPad said, my name might actually be relevant to the topic at hand. Yes, LeftPad is probably the most egregious example of an unnecessary library that broke an entire ecosystem one day. But yes, I was saying that if you can statically link a library into your program, if you're compiling a native program, then you have more control over that dependency. It basically becomes part of the code of your program, but you don't benefit from security updates or hot fixes to the library that might fix crashing issues, etc. So you're basically taking on more responsibility of maintaining your program. You are adopting those dependencies as part of your code. So if something goes wrong with that library, you have to do something about it yourself. So it's a double-edged sword. Tim Heaney on YouTube side says, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Yes, that's what we are suggesting here, I think, is that we need to be reinventing the universe every time. We're going to write everything from the ground up with assembly and skip all that other, high-level language effery. Okay. Other people's code is a liability. Sounds like there's some implied judgment here, and we do not want to take responsibility for it unless we are certain that we can re-implement ourselves if required. Okay, sure. But the whole point of using a library to begin with is so that you don't have to waste time implementing it. So one way to look at that statement is to say, don't use huge dependencies that would be impossible to replace. And I kind of agree with that on some level, but you can't really avoid it sometimes. Like if you want to use SDL, SDL2, SDL3 as a dependency because it gives you so much reach to different platforms and streamlines the process of writing multimedia applications, then you're not going to rewrite that all yourself, not in any reasonable amount of time. So sure, you could write something equivalent to SDL that solves only the problems needed by your program with a lot less code. But then you're losing certain things like the ability to deploy to so many different platforms, etc. So really it's about, here's something that I've learned. One of the most important things that you can do as a programmer is to really dial in the requirements. Like, okay, so saying dialing in the requirements means understand exactly what problems you're trying to solve and stay focused on that set of requirements. The problems are the requirements. The problems dictate the requirements. You're trying to write a file synchronization program that needs to work on a certain type of network or under certain circumstances, like networks where connection drops off often, like mobile networks. So you're writing a file synchronization program where your network connection will constantly get drops. You need to have a way to compensate for that. Focus only on that. Don't be adding other stuff. Don't try to add other synchronization strategies, etc. Focus only on that. By becoming really clear on what your requirements are, dictated by the problems you're trying to solve, then you can make good choices about what libraries to use, what code to write, etc. I'm trying to like dial back to how I got onto that train of thought, but that's basically the way that I look at things now. It's like, what are the requirements? What problems am I trying to solve? And just get really laser focused on that and not think too much about like what other things are possible. Retro Pixel says, I would also think that in a scenario where you would need to write 30, 50 lines of code that changes rarely versus bringing in the dependency, you might want to write it yourself. Oh yeah, 100%. But that is literally the JavaScript ecosystem. There's so many tiny little packages that do stupid shit, like is odd, is even, like give me a break. I mean, come on, dude. Like copy the freaking code from Stack Overflow and just be done with it. Like don't be installing packages for that. I really can't believe that a whole ecosystem is literally founded on stupid packages that nobody should have ever written. Benoit says that can be summarized with system crafting. I'm guessing you're referring to what I just said before. Ashra says, if your node modules isn't 1.5 gigabyte, are you even writing code? Yeah, you're right about that. And probably like a third, at least, of that is like native binaries that are being pulled in via NPM to do things. There's so much crap in the JavaScript ecosystem. Ed says, unless you ship a flat pack or whatever, isn't the point of these things to allow devs to control their dependencies? Excuse me. You mean like... So controlling your dependencies is only possible if you get to decide when a dependency gets upgraded. You don't have that choice on most Linux systems. You do kind of have that choice on Geeks, because your package can specialize a library package to say, I only want this specific version, this specific commit of this library. So you can do that in Geeks. But in Debian, let's say, if your program depends on a library and Debian has packaged that library, and the Debian maintainers decide, okay, we're going to upgrade to this new point release of this library, that upgrade can break your program because your program is not expecting that library is going to get upgraded. Now, the assumption may be that they're only upgrading to a version that is compatible with the previous version they had in their package repository. But programmers make mistakes all the time, and bugs creep in. So you may have a crashing bug in your program now because you're tripping on an issue that was introduced by some patch release to a library that got upgraded without your control. So I think that's sort of the problem that's being discussed here. Retro Pixel says, I don't think Geeks keeps old versions. No, they don't keep old versions unless programs that are already packaged depend on them, but you have 100% control over the dependencies of the software that you package. Now, whether or not you can commit those package definitions to the mainline Geeks channel and sort of pin those dependencies to a certain version or commit is another story entirely. The Geeks maintainers will have to discuss that with you. But if you're writing your own Geeks package for your software, your own Geeks channel, let's say, you can do whatever you want. You can take an existing package and you can change any detail about it and then have Geeks build that for you to have the exact dependency that you want for your program. So that is one benefit of Geeks. What time is it? Okay. Sorry for that, folks. All right, so let's see. Forcing others to upgrade a piece of software only to make our code work is insulting and disrespectful. If you need additional libraries beyond what is provided by default, then build them from sources. Okay. So I kind of agree with the spirit of this because it's the mirror image of what's being said before. What it's saying is they're recommending that you don't depend on libraries that can be changed out from under you and cause your program to be unstable. And the flip of that is don't depend on a piece of software that will need to be upgraded and may break other people, I guess. But I guess if this is happening, then then they already depend on that software. So you're all sort of bought into the same problems to begin with. So I don't know how much that really helps. All right. Retro Pixel says, but it would be easy to make your own Geeks channel with certain versions. Would be cool if you could make a custom channel from Manifest. Custom channel from a Manifest. Well, definitely making a custom channel is not too bad. So, if you need additional libraries beyond what is provided by default, I'm guessing by the Linux distribution, then build them from sources. I'm guessing that also means build them into your program, statically link them effectively. Benoit says, I do agree with statically linked on or other systems that are not affected by someone pulling the rug. Yeah, I mean, that may be the best solution, even though there are risks to it. Also, that gives you the ability to make your own fixes to the code that solve your problems. And that's the whole damn point of open source and free software, is that you depend on a piece of code. You should be able to change it if there's a problem that you need to fix for yourself. So I kind of feel like more people should do that. And you do see that in a lot of larger projects. You'll see that certain dependencies are either vendored into the source tree, meaning the whole source of a given library is pulled into the source tree, or some native projects will use header-only libraries for like C programs, which are pretty cool. So like the STB libraries or a lot of others out there that are effectively a header file that you pull into your program and compile it directly in to provide some kind of functionality, and that code basically belongs to your code base at that point. So that is a possible thing to do. How far are we? We still have 2 more. Okay. What are your thoughts so far on this part? All right. Check the YouTube side. Retro Pixel says, I've read this manifesto and the end is crazy. We'll have to get there before the stream's over. All right, let me see if I can hit this next one pretty fast. Strive for robustness. We follow the plus minus 10-year rule. Write your software so that it can be made to work on 10-year-old hardware and operating systems and on systems that will exist 10 years from now with reasonable effort, unless your project is highly specific to brand new or obsolescent hardware. This means that we will not be able to ride the newest hype in programming languages, software tools, or libraries. Be grateful for that. This also means that you will have to write your code in C or something built on top of C. I don't have a problem with that, personally. Let's get back into that, though. That's fine because computers were designed to run C efficiently and will still do so in the future. Don't listen to evangelists. They still use C. They just added restrictions and gave it a different name. Okay, this was definitely written after the Rust era. Why should you let yourself be restrained in what you can express? Shouldn't you try to learn to be more thoughtful and disciplined instead? Designing robust software means you know what you're doing and doing it in a responsible manner. So, all right, that's a pretty spicy one here. The first one is kind of hard. Write your software so that it can be made to work on 10-year-old hardware. That part is not so hard. And operating systems and on systems that will exist 10 years from now. Okay, I guess what they're saying is things that exist right now that will still exist 10 years from now. Chicken does compile through C. Yep. So it's difficult to do this with newer programming languages unless they either use LLVM or they compile down to C, or They have a huge team of contributors who are implementing backends for different architectures and older systems. So I think that this whole section here is basically pushing people towards writing things in C or in platforms that are at least translating things down to C or being very C-like. And that's definitely indicated by the next thing. That means we will not be able to ride the newest hype in programming languages, software tools, or libraries. Be grateful for that. I personally think that writing C code is not a bad thing. C is not bad. You could definitely write a lot of buggy code in C, but there are very, very good tools for analyzing C code and making sure that your usage of memory and everything else is going to work correctly. So it's not so unsafe to use C, in my opinion. But I have not written mission critical systems in C, so I don't know all the pitfalls there. But I think that even Rust is not going to be perfect. So we can't really say that using Rust instead of C is going to make software inherently more reliable or secure or stable. It might, just in some percentage, but I just don't think that it's going to be 100%. Ashra says no code is ever perfect. Yeah, because not only is there, I mean, sure, you can depend on the type system to check your memory usage all day, your memory references all day, but there's still the whole human logic aspect involved. You know, how a person writes code, how they interface with outside systems, how they interface with the platform itself. Rust can't catch you from doing stupid things that don't have anything to do with, you know, the borrow checker. So Ashra says, I'm going to say that the average Rust code has less issues than the average C code. Certainly. I'm certain that the most common problems that you have in C code are avoided pretty well with Rust. But then you have to factor in the complexity of Rust, the complexity of the Rust toolchain, etc., to decide whether it's actually worth it. Faith says, think goes are just as dangerous as allocation errors. Yeah. Benoit says, any language that forces you to manage your memory puts you on the road of execution level security issues. That's interesting. Okay. This also means that you will have to write your code in C or in something built on top of C. Well, okay, pretty much everything's built on top of C to some degree. That's fine because computers were designed to run C efficiently and will do so in the future. The thing I like about C is that there are compilers to make C code run on pretty much everything. So if you want the widest reach possible for the program you're writing, you can try to write it in C. And C is fun. So it's kind of like the ultimate cross-platform programming solution. You can write Android applications in C too. Now, I don't know if you can do all the UI stuff in C, but you could definitely run a program and display things on the screen using C on Android and even probably iOS. It would have to be it, right? So C is kind of the ultimate language in a way, even though it has its limitations. Why should you let yourself be restrained in what you can express? Well, I don't know. You can't really say that C is going to give you full freedom of expression because C is so limited in terms of expressiveness as a language that, and also the standard library is kind of terrible. So I feel like I am restrained in what I can express, which is why I'm interested in languages like Janet, which give you a better programming language that compiles down to C that you can then use a C compiler to build cross-platform. Because then you get the best of both worlds. You have a better language you can use, and then you can compile using a C compiler, then that means your code can go everywhere. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that C allows you to be perfectly expressive for your ideas. I think it limits you in a lot of ways. Shouldn't you try to learn to be more thoughtful and disciplined instead? Yes, of course, but that applies to any language. Designing robust software means that you know what you're doing and doing it in a responsible manner. That's any language also. But I guess what they're saying is if you're good enough to write robust and reliable software, you can just do it in C. All right, last one. No, last two. Wow, there's more. Wow, there's more. Holy shit. We did not make it through this, did we? Holy shit. How did I not realize there were so many? Why didn't you tell me? Don't work for free if you do not enjoy it. Okay, that one's pretty easy, right? We're just going to blow through these last few, all right? We spent a lot of time on the others because I thought there were only like 6. Big E said, I did tell you. Well, it didn't come through. Let me just scan through these. Do not think you can make computing secure. Yeah, that's foolish. 50 minutes ago. Clearly, I can't tell what 1 out of or 2 out of 12 means. All right, skip that one. Use input devices when they make the most sense. If changing between keyboard and mouse is annoying to you, get a smaller keyboard. Okay. How does this have anything to do with brutalist programming? If a UI feature is hard to understand, it may be pointless. Pointless. It's pointless and should not exist. Okay, sure. Avoid all ornaments. We eschew all visual gimmicks, animations, and eye candy. Sure. I mean, I basically live that day to day. This is what you see. That's what I see all day. Add complexity and show that we wasted our time and energy. I don't agree with that. I mean, sure, if you're like us and you enjoy using terminal programs or very minimal programs, okay, fine. But you can't just totally throw out nice looking user interfaces because it can make software nicer to use. It can make someone more likely to use the software to solve their own problem. I don't know. Humans are kind of stupid. So sometimes you need the right dopamine rewards to reinforce good behavior. And flashy UI can do that sometimes. Just imagine all the people who keep buying Apple products. Don't you think that people kind of like the flashy shit? I mean, like, they like it. What else? What other programs? Or literally any application that's on any of the Apple app stores, right? People like the stuff. You can't say that it's completely useless. However, for me, I don't really care about it because it doesn't really help me. So I'm okay with saying not everybody needs flashy stuff, okay? Mitma says, new principle. If you need a 2-hour stream to go through your guiding principle, maybe you should learn to apply your own rules. I'm going way too slow through this. I think that a person could probably read all this in about 20 minutes, and I've taken way too long to discuss it. They try to rationalize their personal taste. Think of the visually impaired users. Sure, definitely think of the visually impaired users. But at the same time, there's all kinds of software out there. But yes, I mean, it makes sense to care about people who aren't going to be able to use the software because of impairments. If you need graphics, you probably do not need a full graphical user interface toolkit. If you need a graphical user interface, then simplify it. User interfaces do not need to look nice. They should just be obvious and effortless. Well, sure, that just fits into the brutalist sort of aesthetic. I would say that, you know, Emacs fits the bill pretty well in this case because Emacs is kind of like the best middle ground, or at least graphical Emacs is the best middle ground between text-only interface and having some improved display, like, you know, different font sizes, collapsible sections, images that can be inserted, etc. Benoit says, we made it simpler for your closing thoughts. But the manifest says everything should be mouse driven. Did it say that? Gunn says system crafter shorts will be introduced soon. What? Super Stay Up says paperclip fellow from Microsoft Word was a useful feature. I mean, I think it was useful to some people for sure. Okay, anyway. User interfaces do not need to look nice. They just should be obvious and effortless. Okay, easy breezy, beautiful. Tools are just tools. We use tools, we replace them, we ignore them. We shouldn't be dependent on them. They may become obsolete, non-portable, broken, but we still have to go on. Careful thought and printf debugging is still the best method to find bugs. Yeah, I mean, that's all I do because I'm lazy and I don't want to use a debugger. When you're really stuck, take a long walk and think about it. More of the wet noodle programming here. You will be surprised often how often that works. We avoid all powerful intermediate data formats. As plain text with clear structure is universal. Oh yeah, sure. Easy to debug, portable, and extensible. I agree with that 100%. I think that binary data formats that are inscrutable are not nice. But sometimes you need them because you can't read an audio waveform in text format and understand what you're looking at. Maybe you can, I can't. If you think you need a database, consider first whether the file system is really not sufficient for your needs. I agree with that. The only truly crucial tool is between your ears. Okay. Be humble. We are not Google. Excuse me. We will never need the scalability that we so often think that is what makes software robust. Yes, all the people who are so crazy about Kubernetes, microservices, etc. Most things don't need to be microservices. There's a little bit of a backlash right now in the programming community. I see it more on X than anything else. David Heidemeyer Hansen is kind of leading one arm of this, talking about going back to monoliths instead of using containerized apps. And I do agree with that in large part. I think people over-eagerly apply container or microservices containers to problems that don't really need it. But for certain types of software systems, you kind of do need to have that solution, but I think most don't. So you don't need to be worried about scale until you have scale problems. Sure, it's nice to sort of be prepared for scale problems in advance, but if you're designing a system to be scalable when it never ever will need to be scalable, then you're wasting time. So I agree with that. We measure before we optimize, and we never trust benchmarks that others have done. Hardware is cheaper than software. Hardware is cheaper than software. Yeah, so that's another thing that people are talking about lately. Just, get a beefier machine. Start with a simpler machine first. Scale up the hardware instead of the software. And instead of using microservices, just spawn processes on the same machine, potentially, to load balance the different cores if you don't have a programming language that can use threads across cores. Think about how much of your decision to dismiss the straightforward approach is based on folklore, insecurity, or delusion. I would simplify that statement by saying, think about how much of your decision to dismiss the straightforward approach is based on the current zeitgeist of programming or hype. So not really insecurity or, delusion maybe. Insecurity, I don't know. Folklore maybe, but definitely hype. We talked about hype recently in the channel. People make decisions based on hype often. Man, marketing for programming platforms, or let's say cloud deployment platforms, is so powerful. It's insane how powerful it is. I don't know how many of you have seen Vercel. It's like the Apple of cloud platforms, because if you go to their website, let's just look it up. Vercel. Hype-driven development, 100%. If you go to Vercel's website, it might as well be Apple because it looks all flashy and fancy and nice fonts and nice presentation. You look at this and it shortcuts your rational thinking ability and goes straight to the limbic system. It's like, oh, this is shiny. It must be good quality, right? And you can see how it's really easy to deploy stuff to this platform. I'm not knocking this platform at all, okay? Let me just be very clear. I'm not knocking the platform. I don't think there's anything bad about the platform. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to use it. I'm just saying that marketing is really effective. And if you go to this website, you might think that you need to use this for your project or your solution that you're developing for a customer or whatever. You probably don't. Probably don't need to use it. But but the marketing just makes you think you do. And you go to social media, and a lot of people are talking about it and hyping it up. And a lot of people have kind of a vested interest in hyping it up because they're sort of getting some network effect of you using that thing by you watching their videos or consuming their content or coming to you as a thought leader or whatever. You have to be very careful on social media to... Oh, is it killing the stream? I'm not surprised. Let me check the OBS. Okay, the stream is still up, thank God. So there we go. The Brutalist software approach should apply here, where the stream is killing it. Anyway. On social media, hype is rampant. And there's always something new. People are talking about whatever the new thing is, whatever the new idea is, and it will get into your head. And you will think that you need to use something when you don't really need to use it. Yeah, it's recovering now. I think it overloaded the rendering of the system, and OBS couldn't cope with it. Yes, well, it's kind of easy to on this system right now. I'm not going to put it all on Vercel, but they were doing some really funky stuff with the CSS on the animation. So pretty funny, right? That's a good example of how things should be lighter than they really are. Okay. So a lot of decisions are made based on hype. Be careful not to be swayed by hype. Portability is overrated. To maintain our code to be on all possible platforms. Sure, yeah. I mean, in many cases, you probably only want to make stuff work on either ARM or x86, x86 64. So you don't need to have all platforms, but I don't know how many people run into that as like a time waster. Don't work for free if you do not enjoy it. I think that basically means don't create software and release it to the world to be maintained for free unless you really, really want to. If proprietary software platform forces us to use broken software tools, we should consider to not write software for that platform. Unless we were employed by the vendor or compensated another way. If the interface with which our software has to communicate is weak, then we should think hard before putting any effort into overcoming the obstacles. If the interface causes us mental or physical pain, we should stop programming against it. Okay. Too many programmers have been worn out by bad languages, tools, and APIs. How can we trust platforms and enrich our ecosystem which suck the life out of us and our fellow programmers? Okay. I think this means a different thing than open source. I think this actually means you are contributing to a platform sort of for free by engaging in the platform. You're giving it energy by working on things for that platform. But is it really worth it? Because is it causing you more pain than you're getting value out of it, I guess? Who knows? Do not listen to others. The last one. Okay, let's get through it fast. We never take a software methodology, school of programming, or some other random internet dude's manifesto at face value. That's nice. A little bit of a tongue-in-cheek cinema verite self-reflection. So basically, everything you just read and spent all this time trying to digest, yeah, don't listen to it. It's just the rambling of some dude on the internet, and you shouldn't be listening to other people. So, made you read it. I'm sure he's not laughing at us, but that's just the way that I wanted to portray that. Rules must be broken when necessary. So everything that was said before, you should break these rules when necessary. But then you have to be a master to know when it's necessary to break a rule. All Zen masters are alcoholics because they know when to break the rules. Just kidding. You decide in the end what is right and what is wrong, depending on circumstances. It depends. Every rule has its exception. Cargo cults lurk everywhere, and every promise that something makes your life as a programmer easier while not acknowledging that you will have to pay for it in one way or another is a lie. Okay. So I definitely agree with the idea about cargo cults. Basically saying if you use Rust, your program will be bug-free. That's kind of cargo culting, right? Because you're just accepting something to be true and expecting that you're going to get a certain result without actually validating that for yourself or considering whether it's possible. Computer science, quote unquote, is to the largest part religion, propaganda, and hype. Well, I wouldn't say computer science is. I would say modern software engineering is. Computer science is, at its core, a branch of mathematics. I'm not going to say it's religion, propaganda, and hype. The modern software industry definitely is religion, propaganda, and hype. Principles are important, but they should only guide and not control you. Only sycophants and monks are able to live up to their final consequences. Best practices just formalize mediocrity. I don't know about that. I mean, sure, in some cases, maybe. Innovation means diverging from the mainstream. Sure. Art means creating something that didn't exist before. But you better make something that is not doing unnecessary stuff. I mean, doesn't the assumption that you're making art imply that you're doing something that wasn't needed? Big Edie says, I like how he capitalizes cargo. Is this whole thing basically just throwing shade at Rust? I think that's the implication there with the big capital C cargo is we're talking about Rust here. Everything's about Rust in the end. He's just really upset with all the people saying that he should rewrite Chicken Scheme in Rust, which I would be upset too. The starving artist stereotype is there for a reason. Yeah. RetroPixel says, we make better tools so more people can code because so many people are benefiting from coding. Well, yes. I think that there's a lot of value to making it so that more people can code. Because being able to write code is the first step towards understanding that you do have some say in how you get to use a computer, at least in the platforms that allow you to do that. So, yeah, I think that anything that enables more people to code is good. RetroPixel says, I'm not really a fan of any of these. I'm a godlike programmer, and I just use C, and you noobs just don't get it. Yeah, I don't think that anybody who has that that angle is they're lacking empathy, let's say. Benoit says, so the author did create a platform. Technically, no. The author just made a scheme implementation, which I guess you could say is sidestepping the issue by you're implementing someone else's platform. Does that contradict a couple of rules? I don't know. I mean, this may all be a reaction to having written Chicken Scheme. So who knows? I will say, I admire the intent of the author of this to distill a lot of things that they have come to conclusions on over their years as a programmer, because there are a lot of good things in here, obviously. Like, there's a lot of things we agree with. There's some things that are a little bit too much on the hardcore side. But I think that almost anyone would have the tendency to just throw in a few little barbs like that based on the things they've run into in their life, because we all run into really dumb stuff that kind of rubs us the wrong way, and we kind of want to tell other people, hey, don't do that. So there's value to reading this distillation of someone else's experience in this way. I would probably be too lazy to write my own, so I admire that Felix has done this. SLS says, okay, after this, I think it is fine to also write a System Crafter's Manifesto. I don't know. I'll let you guys write that. I don't know. I don't know if I want to write the System Crafter's Manifesto. But I think that having a conversation around things that are important to people like us would be interesting. I'm kind of like moving in that direction in my thinking about like where to go next in the channel. RetroPixel says, number one, have fun. I agree with that. Have fun and do things mostly for yourself. And if you can help other people with what you're doing, then that's good. Fade says, I just did 3 points on one IRC message. Look up. Where is Fade's last message? Make system your own. Define your own what system and own means. Okay, yeah. Sure. Fade says this document is mutually self-contradictory. I think that was the goal, actually. I think that it was meant to be self-contradictory. Fade says, number 1, be talented. Number 2, have good taste. Number 3, refine the output of implementing points 1 and 2 recursively. Yeah, but how do you get to number 1? Benoit says, we should be fearless to experiment and reimagining, re-imaging before a stream is totally normal. Yes, it's normal. And I don't know, like, I think I just live with the most stupid computer problems of anybody that I know. And I'm probably inflicting it all on myself. So I'm really not the best person to be following on all this. Okay, so conclusions. It's interesting to see other people's perspective, see what they've learned. I don't think that I would be personally following all of the Brutalist Programming Manifesto, but I don't really think you should live your life by any manifesto. You should take ideas that you think are useful and good from various places and put together your own personal philosophy of how you want to conduct yourself in the sphere of life, or the many spheres of life, let's say. Because we're all learning. We all have different backgrounds, different sets of experiences. The things that the person wrote here don't necessarily match up to the things that you've seen in your life, so you're probably not going to agree with everything, so you shouldn't have to. But you can take the pieces that you resonate with and maybe the observations that they make that apply to the problems that you're going through, and maybe, you know, get something good out of it. Poem says, I wish you kept your Discord server. Just go to IRC. Go to the System Connectors website, to the community section. It tells you how to connect to the IRC. So, I don't know. Seemed like that was a fun conversation. I'm kind of glad I did it. If people have other interesting things they want to discuss on future streams, please send links to me and we'll consider it, because, you know, we've been doing a lot of programming streams and, like, you know, tool streams recently. And I think we need to go back to doing some talky streams a little bit, because we get some good thoughts out of it. So definitely open to suggestions. But next week, I think I will probably cover this UXN thing that I mentioned before, because it's a pretty interesting little piece of software and idea. So I'll try to see if I can get that ready and talk about it next week. So thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate your time and attention. Hope this was fun. Leave a comment or come to IRC and let me know if you liked it. And until next time, have a great weekend and happy hacking. We'll see you.